She took it off my mother's body before she was cold, my mother said into the microphone, and 53 people at the church toy drive stopped moving. She said I had stolen my dead grandmother's jewelry, and by the following Thursday I had lost an apartment, half my shifts at work, and my name in our church had turned into something people lowered their voices around. Then a woman I had never met stood in a fellowship hall 8 months later and read one sentence from an estate sale ledger out loud, and my mother could not finish saying my name before I go on. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Alyssa Marie Bennett. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Springfield, Missouri on Saturday, December 9th, 2023. The church was First Mercy Community on South Fremont Avenue, the red brick one with the flat white steeple and the fellowship hall that always smelled faintly like burnt coffee and pine cleaner, no matter what season it was. Every December, they ran a holiday toy drive for families referred through 3 elementary schools and 1 women's shelter. My father, Daniel Bennett, was retiring that month after 28 years as maintenance supervisor for Greene County Transit, so my mother had convinced the church to fold his retirement cake and speech into the toy drive reception because, in her words, people are already gathered and it is good stewardship. That was how she liked to speak, very measured, very church board. She had been believed for so long she had stopped needing to raise her voice. I was at the folding table by the side wall, sorting a stack of donation cards into age groups 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. My hands smelled like the peppermint hand sanitizer from the welcome table because the pump was broken and kept spitting too much into my palm. I remember that because when my mother said it, I was holding a green marker with the cap between my teeth. My grandmother, Lorraine Mercer, had died on November 21st, 18 days earlier. She was my mother's mother, 79, congestive heart failure. She died at Mercy Hospital South with one thin gold chain on small pearl studs and a wedding set she had stopped taking off years before her knuckles swelled. There was no body covered in diamonds. There was no dramatic scene. There was hospice paperwork, a plastic belongings bag, and my aunt saying, "We need to keep everything together." But my mother knew exactly what kind of sentence would stain a room. She was standing near the nativity display they rolled out every December, holding the wireless church microphone in one hand and a paper plate in the other. My father had just finished giving his little retirement speech about bus barns and brake lines and the men who kept me honest. People were smiling. Someone had started clapping again. Then my mother leaned toward the microphone and said, with that controlled, soft voice of hers, "Before everyone congratulates Alyssa for helping today, I think it is fair to say she took it off my mother's body before she was cold." The room went silent in layers. First, the women at the cocoa urn stopped talking. Then the kids stopped dragging toy bins across the linoleum. Then my father looked at the floor. I counted that silence later because it lived in my body for months. It was 6 seconds before anyone said anything. "What?" It came from Mrs. Hargrove, one of the church volunteers. My mother kept going. Lorraine's sapphire ring, the bracelet with the safety clasp, and the pearl earrings are gone. Alyssa was with her things. I would simply like the truth. That is how long it took her to move me from daughter to suspect. I took the marker out of my mouth and set it down. I did not walk toward her. I did not defend myself into a microphone. Instead, I looked around the room and saw exactly who had heard it. My boss's wife, Trina McKay, with a red Target bag full of toddler books, Kaylee Brooks from leasing at Bradford Park Apartments, who had toured me through Unit B12-3 the Tuesday before, Deacon Ellis and his wife, 2 dental patients' mothers, my cousin Jenna with her phone face down on the table, not moving. I said, "That is not true." My mother smiled without warmth. "Then you should have no trouble accounting for what is missing." She handed the microphone to my father. He did not take it at first. Then he did. He cleared his throat and said, "Let us just all settle down and finish the toy drive." That was worse somehow. Not the accusation kind, the management kind. My Aunt Carla, my mother's younger sister, was standing near the coat rack. She knew something then, I could see it in her face, but she looked away. A woman I did not know touched my elbow and asked if I needed water. I said no. My throat was dry enough to hurt, but I said no. Then I picked up my tote bag, walked through 53 pairs of eyes, and left through the side door into 34-degree air that smelled like wet leaves and diesel from Kansas Expressway. At 3:22 that afternoon, while I was sitting in my Honda Civic in the church parking lot with the heat blasting my shins, my phone started buzzing. First my cousin Jenna, then my friend Marisol, then my landlord application portal sent an update notice. I opened that one first because I still thought my life was normal enough for logistics to matter. Application status changed. I logged in with my email and saw a gray banner that said, "Offer withdrawn pending further review." I stared at it for a full minute. At 3:36, Trina McKay sent me a text. "Alyssa, I think you should take Monday off. Dr. McKay needs to discuss a concern that was brought to his attention." A concern at 3:41. My mother texted me, "Bring the jewelry back before this becomes something larger. No question mark, no if. Just an instruction." I took screenshots, every one of them, timestamps visible, names visible. I made a folder in my phone called December 9th. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change and everyone around you is going to pretend this is just an unfortunate misunderstanding, you already know why I started saving things before I even got home. Trust yourself in that moment. And stay with me. Because by Monday morning, my mother had done something worse than humiliate me in a church hall. She had put it in writing. I lived then in a basement apartment off East Walnut, below a retired couple named the Fords, who watched cable news too loudly and made pot roast every Sunday. My place was 600 square feet, one egress window, old beige carpet, and a kitchen sink that rattled whenever the upstairs toilet flushed. I had been trying to move because the Fords were selling the house in January. Bradford Park Apartments had approved me in principle for a one-bedroom at $935 a month, and I had exactly $1,480 in my checking account after setting aside my January tuition payment for 2 online classes at Ozarks Technical Community College. I was working 28 hours a week at McKay Pediatric Dental and 2 evenings at a boutique pet supply store called Cedar Bark on East Sunshine. It was not glamorous, it was stable. By 7:10 that evening, stable was over. The first Facebook post went up in our church women's group, Mercy Hands Fellowship. My mother was one of the moderators. There were 216 members, almost all women over 40 and a handful of daughters and daughters-in-law. My friend Marisol sent me screenshots because my mother had blocked me from the group 6 months earlier after I corrected her in a thread about my grandmother's doctor. The post said, "Please pray for our family during a private betrayal involving property removed from Lorraine Mercer's effects after her passing. We are heartbroken and asking for repentance. No name." The comments used mine anyway. I knew because Marisol kept sending them. "Is it the granddaughter? How sad." Some young people have no reverence for the dead. At 7:24, my mother replied to one of them with, "We know who had access." That was the first time I understood she intended to make me unemployable in every small room that mattered. I texted her once, "Delete the post. I did not take anything." She wrote back in under 30 seconds, "Then cooperate." That word sat there like a trap. I called my father at 7:42. He answered on the third ring, TV noise in the background, some game show audience clapping. "Dad, tell her to stop." He exhaled slowly. "Alyssa, if you just return whatever you have, this can stay inside the family." "I do not have anything. Your mother is grieving." "She said I stole from a dead woman in front of everyone at church." Silence. Then, "Do not make this uglier." I hung up on Monday, December 11th at 9:15 in the morning. I sat in Dr. Evan McKay's office with a fake ficus in the corner, and that sharp, clean smell of fluoride varnish drifting in from the hall. His wife had been at the toy drive. He looked embarrassed before he even spoke, which made me know I was not keeping all my shifts. He folded his hands and said, "A parent called this morning and said there were community concerns involving theft. I'm not making any accusations, but until this is clarified, I'm going to move you off front desk and reduce your hours for a bit." "How many hours?" He looked at the schedule. 12 this week?" 12? I had rent due in 21 days, I asked. "Did my mother call you?" He hesitated. That was answer enough. I said, "Can you put in writing that my hours are being cut because of an unverified accusation made outside work?" He blinked. "Why would you need that?" "Because it is happening." He was quiet for a moment, then said, I can write that your schedule is adjusted pending review of an external concern. Please do. He printed it on office letterhead. I still have it. That afternoon, Bradford Park sent me an email from Kaylee Brooks. Subject line, application update. The wording was careful. Due to newly received information that raises concern regarding resident suitability, we are unable to proceed at this time. I called the office immediately. Kaylee answered and sounded nervous. Alyssa, I really cannot discuss details. Was it my mother? Long pause. Then quietly. A woman identifying herself as your mother said there was a pending police matter involving stolen jewelry. She said we should be careful. I have not been charged with anything. I understand, but once that is noted in the file, management gets cautious. Can you email me that? I cannot. I'm sorry. That night, I wrote down the call summary in a notebook with the time, her name, and exactly what she said. Tuesday, December 12th, 4:53 p.m. Kaylee Brooks, Bradford Park. Mother claimed pending police matter involving stolen jewelry. Paper starts as memory. Then memory becomes a timeline. That was one of the first things I learned on Wednesday, December 13th at 11:08 in the morning. Officer Jared Lohman from Springfield Police called me while I was stocking dog treats at Cedar Bark. I stepped into the back room near the sacks of cedar bedding and cat litter, where the air always smelled dusty and sweet. He said, Ms. Bennett, I am calling because a theft report was made naming you in connection with missing family jewelry belonging to the estate of Lorraine Mercer. My knees actually weakened for a second. Not dramatic, not movie fainting, just that sudden hollow sensation in the calves. I asked, did my mother make the report? Reporting party is Patricia Bennett. Of course. He said he was doing initial intake and wanted to know if I would be willing to speak. I said yes, but I wanted the report number first. He gave it to me. 23-35871. I wrote it on the back of a receipt for birdseed. Then I asked, what exactly did she claim was stolen? He read from the report. 1 sapphire ring, 1 pearl earring set, 1 gold charm bracelet with safety chain. Approximate total value, $12,400. 12,400. She had assigned a number to my supposed crime. I said my grandmother's hospital belongings were inventoried. Her personal effects were boxed after she died. My Aunt Carla signed for them. I was not in possession of any of that. He paused. Do you have documentation? Not yet, but I will, he said. Send anything you have to my email. This is still just an allegation at this stage. Just an allegation. People say that like allegations float above real life without touching it by then. Mine had already cost me 16 work hours and an apartment. That night I started a binder, white 1-inch Avery, clear sleeve on front. I printed the church Facebook screenshots, my mother's texts, Dr. McKay's schedule reduction note, the apartment email, and a screenshot of my location history from November 21st, showing I was on Highway 65 South at the time my grandmother died, because I had been driving back from Fayetteville after helping my friend Marisol move out of her dorm. I also printed my quick trip receipt from 2:34 p.m. in Harrison, Arkansas, because grief had made me say stupid things and now one of them mattered. My grandmother died at 4:12 p.m. in Springfield. I was not even in Missouri yet. That was the first clean piece of air I had taken in days. Now, let me take you back to Thursday, November 21st, 2023, Mercy Hospital South, 4th floor palliative wing. I was not in the room when my grandmother died. My mother knew that. My father knew that. My Aunt Carla knew that. The nurse chart would show it too. And once I realized that, I stopped trying to get my family to tell the truth and started looking for people whose job required them to write things down. I called Mercy Hospital's records department on Thursday, December 14th, at 9:06 in the morning from my car outside Cedar Bark. There was frost still clinging to the shaded side of the windshield. I asked what could be released to a granddaughter and what needed a state authorization. The woman on the phone, Sharon, explained I could not get my grandmother's full chart, but I could request visitor log information if I was listed in the family contact section, which I was, and I could ask the funeral home for personal effects transfer documentation if I was involved in arrangements. I had signed some transport paperwork because my mother left halfway through to get proper clothes, so I called Greenlawn Funeral Home next. A man named Curtis Henley answered. His voice was so calm it made me feel human again. I said, I'm trying to clear up a false accusation about jewelry. Was there a belongings inventory when Lorraine Mercer was brought in? He did not give me details at first. He said, correctly, that he needed authorization, so I called my Aunt Carla because I knew she had signed for something at the hospital and because at that point I still hoped shame might work on her. She picked up on the fifth ring. Can you tell me what was in Grandma's belongings bag? I asked. Alyssa, this is not the time. It became the time when Mom told 53 people I stole from a corpse. She inhaled sharply. Do not use that word. Then tell me what you signed. Long silence. Then your grandmother had a ring set, pearl studs, a chain, and a bracelet. They were sealed in a valuables envelope by the hospital. I signed that I received them and gave them to your mother at the funeral home. I leaned forward over my steering wheel and closed my eyes. When? November 22nd, around 10 in the morning. So the jewelry was not missing on November 21st. Alyssa. No, say it clearly. She said nothing. I asked, will you text me that? No. That was the moment I understood she was not neutral. She was choosing silence because silence was cheaper for her than honesty. I wrote down the call. Thursday, December 14th, 9:41 a.m. Aunt Carla confirmed hospital valuables envelope included ring set, pearl studs, chain, bracelet. She signed and gave to Patricia at funeral home on November 22nd around 10 a.m. Refused to text. That is what betrayal looks like when it wears sensible shoes. If you have ever had somebody admit the truth to you in private and then refuse to say it where it counts, you know how cold that feels. Not the explosive kind, the administrative kind. Keep listening because the next person I called did not know she was about to split my mother's whole story open. On Friday, December 15th at 1:17 in the afternoon, I took my lunch break in my car behind the dental office and called Greene County Probate. My grandmother had a simple estate. No mansion, no hidden stocks, just a checking account, a paid-off ranch house on North Taylor Avenue, and personal property. My mother was handling things because she was the eldest daughter and because everyone defaulted to her in a crisis. The clerk who answered was Denise Barlow. I did not know then how important that name would become. I told her I was a family member trying to understand whether an itemized estate inventory had been filed yet for Lorraine Mercer. Date of death, November 21st. She asked for the file number. I did not have it. She looked it up by name. Yes, she said after a moment of keyboard clicking. An initial small estate affidavit and inventory was submitted on December 6th. My whole body went still. Can members of the family get a copy? Public record once filed. Can you tell me whether jewelry is listed? Another pause, more clicking. Then, in the ordinary tone of a woman answering routine county questions on a Friday, she said, yes, women's sapphire ring set, pearl earrings, gold charm bracelet, estimated total $12,400. I stared at the steering wheel stitching, listed, not missing, listed with the exact same value my mother had given the police. I asked Denise how to get a copy. She said I could come in person or request by email. I drove downtown on my break and paid $6.50 for the file copies. The paper was still warm from the machine when she handed it through the little opening in the glass. Filed December 6th by Patricia Lynn Bennett. Under oath, jewelry included. On December 9th, 3 days later, my mother told a room full of people I stole items she had already put on an official estate inventory as in her possession. I sat in my car in the county parking garage and read those pages 3 times. The garage smelled like concrete dust and old exhaust. Somebody's radio was thumping from another level. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I did not cry. I made copies. Then I went back to work and smiled at children while I applied grape-flavored fluoride with gloved hands. That night I emailed Officer Jared Lohman the probate inventory, the timeline, and a short note. Reporting party listed alleged stolen items on estate inventory filed 3 days before public accusation and police report. Attached. He replied at 9:26 p.m. received, thank you, I will review. I also sent the probate pages to Kaylee Brooks at Bradford Park with a brief email saying, there is no pending charge. The items my mother said were stolen were listed by her as estate property before she warned you about me. She did not answer that night. On Saturday morning, December 16th, my mother called me at 8:14. I let it ring 6 times before answering. Her voice was smooth. I'm hearing you have been making calls. Yes. You're upsetting people during mourning. You filed jewelry as estate property on December 6th. A pause. Then, inventory is not possession. You do not understand these processes. Plain language translation. She was improvising, I said. You told the church I took jewelry from Grandma's body. That was what I believed at the time. No, it was not. You had already signed paperwork. She switched tones then. Colder. Alyssa, if you continue trying to embarrass your father during his retirement month, there will be consequences. I said, there already have been. Then I hung up and added the call to my notebook. By Monday, December 18th, the police officer called back. He said carefully that based on conflicting documentation and the inventory discrepancy, the theft claim was being marked inactive pending further evidence. He did not say false report. He did not need to. I could hear in his voice that he understood what my mother had done. I asked if I could get that in writing. He said he could email a status confirmation. He did. Subject line, case update. I printed that too. Then I thought maybe the worst part was over. It was not. My mother had reached the point where the truth was not enough to stop her because the accusation itself had become useful. On Thursday, December 21st, at 6:40 p.m., while I was eating microwaved soup from a chipped bowl in my apartment, my phone lit up with a message from Deacon Ellis's wife, Ruth. I had known her since middle school. She was one of those women who always smelled like white diamonds perfume and peppermints. Alyssa, I thought you should know your mother told the Benevolence Committee not to put you on next month's volunteer schedule because there are concerns about valuables. Volunteer schedule. I actually laughed once when I read that, because by then the scale of it was almost absurd. She wanted me removed from handling donated toys and gift cards, too. Not just in our family, not just at work. In every room where other people trusted me with anything. I wrote back, thank you for telling me. Can you send that in a text with her exact words if possible? Ruth called instead, whispering. Her husband was in the room. She said Patricia told us, and I quote, for the protection of the church, Alyssa should not be around stored items until this is resolved. Will you text that to me? A pause. Then quietly, yes. At 6:56 p.m., it arrived, I printed it. There is a kind of anger that makes people wild. This was not that kind. This was the kind that sharpened me. I started spending every lunch break downtown or on the phone. I requested the church's audio from the toy drive under the pretense that I wanted a copy of my dad's retirement remarks for family memory. The office assistant, Nicole Rivas, emailed me the whole WAV file on December 27th because she was too busy with year-end donation receipts to edit it. My mother's sentence was there. Clear as a bell. 6 seconds of silence after Mrs. Hargrove saying, "What?" right on cue. I pulled my Google Maps timeline for the day my grandmother died. I got bank statements showing where I was. I emailed Green Lawn Funeral Home again, this time attaching the probate inventory and explaining there was an active police matter built around whether jewelry had been received from the hospital. Curtis Henley called me back and said he could not discuss family dynamics, but he could provide, upon written request by the person who signed at intake, the transfer receipt for decedent personal effects. The signature on that receipt, he confirmed, was Patricia Bennett's. I did not have my mother's cooperation, obviously, but I knew now that the paper existed. On Friday, January 5th at 10:30 in the morning, another piece moved. Kaylee from Bradford Park called. "We are reopening your application," she said. I was standing in the break room at the dental office beside a humming mini fridge and a box of stale powdered donuts. What changed? Management reviewed what you sent, and our regional manager listened to the voicemail left by your mother. I gripped the edge of the counter. There is a voicemail? She called after the first conversation and said, "This girl steals from the dead and lies smoothly. If she is on your property, do not say we did not warn you. We save voicemails for fair housing compliance." I closed my eyes. Can I get a copy? I cannot release it directly, but our compliance manager can confirm it if needed. Needed. That word became my favorite. If you are still listening and thinking this is already enough, I know. It should have been. But some people cannot stop once they have told a lie in public because they know the correction will never travel as fast. My mother counted on that. What she did not count on was a paper trail spread across a police report, a church audio file, a leasing voicemail system, and a county office staffed by a woman who did not care who my mother was at Bible study. Now let me take you back to Sunday, January 7th, 2024, 11:50 a.m., Fellowship Hall at First Mercy Community again. Same folding tables, same pine, cleaner smell, different season in me. Church people are very good at acting like rupture is a scheduling problem. There had been Christmas, New Year's. My parents had not spoken to me except for one text from my father on Christmas Eve that said, "You are welcome to come if you can be peaceful." I did not go. I spent Christmas with Marisol and her sister in Nixa eating tamales and watching old sitcoms under two blankets. It was the first holiday in my life where I did not have to monitor my own face. By the first Sunday in January, I had my Bradford Park application reinstated, but the unit I wanted was gone. The one they offered instead faced the dumpsters and cost $20 more a month. Dr. McKay had restored 6 of my lost hours, but not all of them. He kept saying, "until everything settles." Settles is another word people use when they mean they are waiting to see whether your name clears on its own, so they do not have to choose courage. After service that Sunday, I went to pick up the toy drive tote I had left in the supply closet weeks earlier. My mother was there with Ruth Ellis, arranging leftover candy canes in a plastic bin. She saw me and said in that careful public tone, "I would prefer not to do this here." I said, "Then stop doing it everywhere else." Ruth stepped back. My mother lowered her voice. "You have made this much worse than it needed to be." I looked at the bins, the label maker, the stack of clipboards. I wanted to pick up every object in that room and throw it against the wall. I did not. I took out my phone and hit record in my coat pocket. "I did not steal anything," I said. She replied, "Then explain why your grandmother's ring set is still not where it belongs." Still not where it belongs. There it was, the new version, not missing, misplaced by me in some vague moral sense. I said, "You listed it in the estate inventory." She answered, "Estate estimates are provisional." That one sentence told me something important. She was not just lying emotionally, she was trying out language. I took my tote and left. On Tuesday, January 9th, I finally called the one person in my family who had both information and an incentive to protect herself. My cousin Jenna's husband, Mark Ruiz, handled bookkeeping for a local estate sale company called Walnut Creek Estate Services. Not a lawyer, not a hero, just a man who noticed numbers. He answered on speaker while I was parked outside OTC under a gray sky that looked like dirty wool. I said, "Did your company do anything with Grandma's things?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I should not be in the middle of this." "That means yes." Another pause, then, "Your mother had us do a preliminary walkthrough on December 28th. Jewelry was separated for outside evaluation." That is all I know. Who evaluated it? Mercer Estate Buyers on South Glenstone. I wrote it down. When? January 3rd, I think. I could hear Jenna whispering in the background. He lowered his voice. "Alyssa, if you call there, do not use my name." I said, "Did you see the sapphire ring?" "Yes." I closed my notebook and held it against my chest for a second. The ring existed in January, in the possession stream controlled by my mother. Weeks after she told church I took it off a body. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Jenna said your mother would make this into a war." "It already is." He had no answer for that. I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, I called Mercer Estate Buyers and asked general questions about whether they provided written intake logs and evaluation slips when families brought in estate jewelry. The woman on the phone, Rochelle, said yes, always, and items stayed tagged by estate name. She would not discuss specific estates with me without authorization. Fair enough. What mattered was that records existed. I spent that week building what I started calling the red folder: church audio transcript, probate inventory, police case update, apartment notes, work schedule reduction letter, Facebook screenshots, my mother's texts, my father's text, Ruth's text about church valuables, my location history, my gas receipt, my notebook timeline. I even printed a still image from the church security footage timeline Nicole accidentally included in a metadata email because it showed me leaving at 12:14 p.m. after the accusation while my mother remained inside talking to 3 women. I had been keeping that folder for 31 days. On Friday, January 12th, after my evening shift at Cedar Bark, I drove to see my Aunt Carla. She lived in Republic in a ranch house with fake blue shutters and too many angel figurines. The living room smelled like cinnamon broom and old dust. She did not invite me to sit. She stood by the recliner with her arms folded. I held out my phone and played the church audio. My mother's voice filled the room. She took it off my mother's body before she was cold. Carla shut her eyes. I stopped the recording and said, "You know she had the jewelry before she said that." Carla nodded once. Tiny, cowardly, real. Then tell someone. She shook her head. Your mother is under strain. I almost laughed again, that phrase. Under strain, as if strain made paperwork rewrite itself. I said, because of her, I lost housing, wages, and my name. Carla whispered, if I say anything publicly, she will cut me off from the house and from what is left of Lorraine's things. There it was. Property. Always property, I asked, one last time. Will you write what you told me on December 14th? No. I looked around her living room at the angel figurines, the floral sofa, the afghan folded over the chair arm. Everything neat, everything arranged. Then I said, when this comes out, do not tell yourself you were trapped. You made a purchase. That landed. I could see it. I left before she answered. If you have ever looked at an adult and realized they are not confused, not intimidated, not powerless, just willing to let you be harmed because it keeps their own life tidy, you know how clarifying that is. It hurts, but it also saves time. And 3 days later, time shifted in my favor. On Monday, January 15th at 2:12 p.m., Denise Barlow from Probate called me back because I had left a follow-up question about amendments to estate inventories. She said, Miss Bennett, I cannot give legal advice, but I can tell you if listed personal property is later sold through estate handling. There may be supplemental paperwork or receipts depending on how the feeler documents disposition. I asked, would that include an outside estate sale company? Potentially, yes. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, we did receive a supplemental valuation note this morning tied to that file. It references Mercer estate buyers. My hand tightened around the phone. What does it say? I heard papers moving, then in that same calm county office tone, she read, estate jewelry package received for liquidation evaluation, $14,860 gross offer. I sat down on the curb outside Cedar Bark because my legs gave out a little. Not stolen, not missing, being sold by my mother. For $14,860, I asked for copies. Denise said I could pick them up. I drove downtown so fast I had to make myself breathe at every red light. The supplemental note was one page. Attached behind it was a faxed intake summary from Mercer Estate buyers, listing 4 items under Lorraine Mercer Estate: sapphire ring set, pearl earrings, gold charm bracelet, gold chain with cross pendant intake, date January 3rd, 2024. Gross offer $14,860. It felt almost obscene how ordinary the font was. I sat in the parking garage again, same level as before, same smell of cold concrete and exhaust. This time I cried for maybe 40 seconds. Not because I was sad exactly, because the thing I had known in my bones finally had numbers on it. I did not call my mother. I called Officer Lohman and left a voicemail with the new documents. I called Bradford Park and updated them. I emailed Dr. McKay's office manager asking for my hours to be fully restored because the accusation had now been disproven by estate records and sales intake documentation. I attached only what was necessary, not because I was protecting my mother, because I was protecting myself. Then I called Ruth Ellis and asked one question. When is the annual Deacons and Finance Volunteers Luncheon? She said. February 4th after service. Why? Will there be guests? Usually board members, ministry leads, and family? Maybe 40 people? Good, I said. I needed the truth in a room that overlapped the lie. Now let me take you back to Wednesday, January 24th, 2024, 7:30 p.m. My kitchen table under the weak overhead light that made everything look slightly sickly. I was eating crackers with hummus and going through my folder for the 100th time when my father called. I put him on speaker and kept sorting papers. Alyssa, he said, your mother tells me you are harassing county employees. Getting copies of public records is not harassment. He sighed. This has gone far enough. It went far enough on December 9th. You're punishing your mother for grieving badly. There are phrases parents use when they do not want to say the real thing. Grieving badly, communicating poorly, family misunderstanding. They are all blankets thrown over sharp objects, I said. She told the church I stole jewelry she later sent to an estate buyer. He was silent for a full 4 seconds. Then, we were trying to preserve value for the estate. I stopped moving. That tiny word. The first honest one. So you knew. We knew some items had to be evaluated, and while they were being evaluated, she told police I stole them. He said very quietly, "Your mother did what she thought she needed to do to force the issue." Force what issue? There was no issue except money and control, and the fact that my grandmother had once told me, in front of my mother, that the sapphire ring should go to me because I had her hands. I had not asked for it. I had not even mentioned it after she died. But my mother had heard it. She had heard a future claim she did not want challenged. I said, "Did you know she called my job and my apartment too?" "I do not know about all that, but you knew enough," he said. "If you keep dragging this through church, do not expect to remain welcome there." I laughed once, tired. "You already took that." Then I ended the call. That night, I wrote a one-page timeline summary in plain language. No legal jargon, no adjectives. Dates, statements, records, consequences. I put the work hour loss at $496 before taxes because that was what the reduced schedule had cost me in December. I included the original apartment withdrawal email and the later reinstatement. I listed the police report number. I added one sentence at the bottom. At no point were the jewelry items missing in the way Patricia Bennett publicly claimed. The next morning, I took the file to my friend Nora Pike. She is not a lawyer. She is a paralegal at a family law office in Ozark, and the most organized person I know. She wore a navy cardigan, smelled faintly like lemon hand lotion, and listened without interrupting while we sat in Panera on East Battlefield. When I finished, she asked, "What outcome do you want? Not what are you entitled to, not what could you do. What do you want?" I said, "I want the lie corrected in front of the same kind of room it was told in. I want my hours back. I want my church volunteer status restored in writing, and I want the police file to reflect what happened." Nora nodded. "Then stop talking to your mother directly, communicate only by text if needed, and put institutions in contact with each other, not through you. Let records travel." That advice changed everything. I emailed Officer Lohman asking whether, if another official needed to confirm the discrepancy, he would speak to them. He said yes. I emailed Dr. McKay's office manager asking her to note in my personnel file that the allegation came from a family dispute and was contradicted by official probate records. She replied that she would. I emailed First Mercy's administrative assistant Nicole asking for written confirmation that no church property complaint had ever been made against me. She sent it the same day, none on file. Then I waited. Waiting is not passive when you have stacked your evidence in the right order. On Thursday, February 1st at 4:18 p.m., Ruth Ellis called. Her husband had mentioned at the deacon meeting that there was ongoing concern around my involvement in youth donation projects. Ruth, to her credit, had finally gotten tired of pretending this was normal. She said, "I told them if they had concerns they should ask for documentation, not rumors." I sat straighter in my car.
And
And Pastor Raymond asked Patricia to bring whatever proof she had to the luncheon Sunday so the issue can be settled. There it was. I said, "Will the finance committee be there?" "Yes." "Will church administrator Nicole be there?" "Yes." "What about outside guests?" "Some spouses." "Why?" Because one of those spouses worked at the county clerk's office. Denise Barlow attended First Mercy with her sister-in-law. I knew that because I had seen her once in the lobby but had not approached her. Springfield is big enough to disappear in and small enough to ruin your life in 3 phone calls. I thanked Ruth and hung up. Then I made one more call to probate, not to pressure, just to ask if Denise would be present at church Sunday, and if so, whether she would mind bringing a certified copy of the supplemental valuation if church leadership asked for clarification about public records. The receptionist said she could pass along the request but could promise nothing. Fine, Sunday would work either way. I already had the documents. What I did not know was that my mother had prepared her own packet. Now let me take you back to Sunday, February 4th, 2024, 12:36 p.m. Fellowship Hall at First Mercy Community Church. The annual luncheon always had the same menu: baked chicken breasts, green beans, mashed potatoes from steam trays, and sheet cake from Hy-Vee with too much icing. The room smelled like gravy, coffee, and those dusty fake poinsettias they had not put away yet. There were 41 people there by my count. deacons, finance volunteers, ministry leads, spouses, my parents, my Aunt Carla, Ruth and Harold Ellis, Nicole Rivas from the church office, Dr. McKay and his wife because he sat on a missions subcommittee, and 3 tables back near the windows. Denise Barlow in a camel coat over a black dress, talking to a woman I assumed was her sister-in-law. I had not been invited exactly. Ruth told me to come, so I did. I wore black slacks, a cream sweater, and the small silver hoops Marisol gave me for my birthday. Hair down, minimal makeup. I did not want to look injured. I wanted to look exact. My mother had a manila envelope and a stapled packet in front of her place setting. My father kept smoothing the edge of his napkin with one finger. Aunt Carla would not look at me. Pastor Raymond Whitaker opened with prayer, then lunch, then a few ministry announcements at 1:10 p.m. He cleared his throat and said, "Before we close, there has been an unfortunate matter affecting volunteer trust and family peace. Patricia, you said you wanted to clarify?" My mother stood. Of course she did. She held her packet with both hands and spoke in that same measured voice. I did not wish to bring family pain into church, but because Alyssa has continued contacting members and offices, I feel forced to explain that valuable jewelry belonging to my late mother was inaccessible after her death, and Alyssa had unusual interest in those items. We made a good faith report based on missing property and inconsistent statements. If there has been confusion in estate paperwork, that is regrettable, but our concern was sincere. Practiced, controlled, full of fog, she started handing copies down the table. I got one too. It was a typed list titled Lorraine Mercer Jewelry Inventory Concerns. No letterhead, no signatures, no dates except handwritten estimates. At the bottom, she had printed a text I sent my grandmother 3 months earlier that said, "I still think your sapphire ring is the prettiest thing you own." That was her evidence of unusual interest. The room was very still. Pastor Raymond looked uncomfortable. "Does anyone have official documentation one way or the other?" I opened my red folder. But before I could say a word, Nicole from the church office spoke up. "I have the audio from December 9th if context matters." My mother turned to her sharply. "I do not think that is necessary." Then Denise Barlow stood. I will never forget that moment. Not because she was dramatic, she was not. She looked like a woman who had left her lunch half finished because someone asked a records question in the wrong room. She said, "I am Denise Barlow with Greene County Probate. I am not here in any official church capacity, but because my office and my name have both apparently been involved in this matter, I think I should correct one point." The room went quiet. She pulled a folded certified copy from her purse and looked down at it. Then she read, plain and steady, "On December 6th, Patricia Lynn Bennett filed Lorraine Mercer's estate inventory listing the sapphire ring set, pearl earrings, gold charm bracelet, and gold chain as estate property in hand. On January 3rd, those same items were received by Mercer estate buyers for liquidation evaluation at a gross offer of $14,860. Silence, 41 people. No forks moving, no chair scrape, nothing. Denise looked up and added, because she did not know the emotional explosion she had just set off, "So if anyone was told those items had been stolen before then, that would not match the records filed with our office." That was it. That was the sentence. My mother opened her mouth. "Denise, I think you may be misunderstanding." Denise did not raise her voice. "I am reading your filing." My father said my name, just Ailey, then stopped halfway through it. Nicole set a small flash drive on the table and said, "And the church audio from December 9th includes Patricia stating that Alyssa removed jewelry from Lorraine's body before she was cold." Mrs. Hargrove whispered, "My God." Then from the far end of the table, my Aunt Carla did the one decent thing she had done in 2 months. She said, barely above a whisper, "I signed for the valuables envelope at the hospital on November 22nd and gave it to Patricia at Greenlawn." You could hear people breathe again after that, like the room had been underwater. My mother sat down slowly, not fainting, not crying, just lowering herself into the chair as if her knees had become unfamiliar. She looked at the packet in her own hands like she had not seen it before. Pastor Raymond asked, "Patricia, did you tell this church that Alyssa stole jewelry you already had documented as part of the estate?" My mother said it was a fluid situation. No one rescued her from that sentence. I did not speak until then. I said very calmly, "Because of that fluid situation, I lost an apartment. $496 in wages, my volunteer schedule, and my name in this church. I slid copies of the apartment withdrawal email, Dr. McKay's hours reduction note, and the police case update to Pastor Raymond and Dr. McKay. Nothing more. I did not need more. Dr. McKay read his copy, swallowed, and said, "Alyssa, your full schedule will be restored tomorrow." Pastor Raymond looked sick. "Nicole, note for the record that Alyssa is cleared for volunteer service and that no church theft complaint exists." Nicole nodded and wrote it down. My mother tried once more. We were under great emotional pressure. Ruth Ellis said, "Pressure does not make a police report invent itself." That line stayed with me. Then Officer Lohman himself, who was not in the room but had answered Pastor Raymond's call on speaker because Nicole had the number from my email chain, confirmed that the case had been pulled back due to conflicting statements from the reporting party and records showing the items were not missing as described. He sounded slightly annoyed to be involved in church lunch, which honestly helped. His boredom made it more real. My father said nothing after that. My mother looked at me once. Just once. There was no apology in it. Only calculation finally failing. The room did not explode. That is not how these things usually happen. It settled. People began asking practical questions in subdued voices. Was the estate sale still proceeding? Should church leaders address the rumor spread? Did the police need the supplemental documents directly from probate? The truth was so plain by then, it made everyone speak more quietly. Public humiliation is loud when it is done to you, quiet when it lands back on the person who built it. After lunch in the hallway outside the fellowship hall, Pastor Raymond asked me if I wanted a written statement for any employer or housing office affected by the accusation. I said yes. He sent it by email that evening at 6:42 p.m. It stated that a false accusation made publicly on church property against me had been contradicted by estate records and should not be relied upon. I forwarded it to Bradford Park. The regional manager called the next morning and offered me the next available one-bedroom at the original rate if I still wanted it. Move-in date February 23rd, I said yes. At 2:14 that afternoon, Dr. McKay's office manager emailed my restored schedule and added 6 makeup hours the following week. He also gave me a $500 discretionary bonus in March and called it retention support. He never said sorry directly. People like him rarely do, but he paid in the one language that counts. As for the police matter, Officer Lohman asked my mother to come back in and clarify her statements due to the records discrepancy. I was not in that room, but I got the outcome through the public report supplement 2 weeks later. The theft allegation against me was closed. A note was added that the reporting party had provided claims inconsistent with estate filings and later disposition records. Whether anyone wants to call that a false report is their choice. What matters is that her name is attached to it now, not mine. The estate itself stalled. Mercer estate buyers withdrew the $14,860 offer until ownership and distribution questions were clarified. My mother had to return the jewelry package to the estate sale company and produce a corrected accounting. She ended up owing the estate $1,192 in fees for appraisal, transport, and administrative corrections because she had moved items outside the original handling plan while claiming they were stolen. My Aunt Carla, suddenly brave once money was at risk to everyone, refused to sign the final distribution papers until the accounting was fixed. Then came church. Patricia Bennett was removed from the Mercy Hands Fellowship moderation team on February 12th. 2 weeks later, she stepped down from benevolence committee work after the board asked her not to handle donation drives during a season of rebuilding trust. That was church language. Plain language was this: they took her keys, her cabinet access, and the role she had built half her identity around. My father's concrete price was smaller but visible. Greene County Transit had invited him back as a part-time consultant after retirement for spring fleet transition work. That offer was withdrawn in March after someone on the county side, who attended First Mercy and had heard enough, decided they did not want public controversy around staff family conduct tied to an active police discrepancy. He lost 9 weeks of contract work worth $6,300. He called me once after that. "Are you happy now?" he asked. I was in my new apartment, standing by the window that faced a row of bare maple trees instead of dumpsters, because another tenant had switched units last minute and management gave me the better one when one opened. The room smelled like cardboard boxes and fresh paint. I had my own lease in my own name and a kitchen that did not rattle when someone upstairs used the bathroom. I said no. And that was the truth. Winning does not restore the original version of your family, it just stops the bleeding. It has been 3 years now. I am telling you this from a different apartment in a different city, with a job that no one can interfere with by whispering at church. I finished my associate degree. I work full-time now as a treatment coordinator at an oral surgery office in Overland Park, Kansas. My hair is longer, my rent is higher, my life is quieter. People always want the ending to be cleaner than it is, so here's the honest one. My mother never apologized, not once. In April of that year, she sent a 6-line email that said, "I regret that private family matters were mishandled and became community confusion." That is not an apology. That is a woman trying to leave a room through passive voice. My father sent me a birthday card in July with $40 in it and no note except Dad. I mailed it back. Aunt Carla did eventually text me. I should have spoken sooner. I did not answer for 6 days. Then I wrote, "You should have." We have spoken twice since. Ruth Ellis still sends me Christmas photos of the church toy drive. Nicole sends me the occasional update about old members. Denise Barlow, the woman who read my mother's own filing out loud over baked chicken and sheet cake, does not know what she did for me beyond her ordinary job. Maybe that is part of why it mattered. She had no motive except accuracy. The jewelry was eventually distributed according to a corrected family agreement. I did receive one item from my grandmother in the end, not the sapphire ring. I did not want it anymore. I took her small gold chain with the cross pendant because it had been listed on the same intake sheet as the lie, and because it was the piece she actually wore every day. I keep it in a blue ceramic dish by my bed. I almost never wear it. Sometimes people ask if I miss my parents. I miss who I thought they were. That is different. There is a specific kind of damage that happens when the people who taught you what shame is decide to use it like a public instrument. Not the random cruelty of strangers, the rehearsed cruelty of people who know your exact pressure points and trust that history will keep you still. My mother knew that accusing me of stealing from my dead grandmother would not just embarrass me, it would make other people do the humiliating for her. Employers, landlords, churchwomen, men who prefer calm to truth. She was right about one thing. It became something larger, just not in the direction she wanted. If you have ever been publicly named in a lie so ugly that even defending yourself felt degrading, I need you to hear me on this. Do not spend your first energy trying to be understood by the person who did it. Spend it preserving the evidence. Save the voicemail, screenshot the post, write down the call, ask for the email, get the file number, pull the record. Let the people whose jobs depend on accuracy do the talking when the time comes. That is how I got my life back. Not all at once, not dramatically, document by document, room by room, the apartment, the hours, the volunteer clearance, the police note, the corrected accounting, the committee seat, the county contract, specific things. That is the only kind of justice I trust now. I still do not go back to First Mercy when I visit Springfield. I drive past sometimes on South Fremont and see the little sign out front with whatever sermon series they are doing and the seasonal banners tied to the railings. In December, if the weather is dry, you can sometimes see toy collection bins through the fellowship hall windows. I never park. I keep driving, because the truth is I won, clearly, publicly, on paper. My mother paid, my father paid. Their names are attached to what they did in ways mine no longer is. And still, there are some rooms that stay cold in your body, that one does. So no, this does not end with forgiveness. It ends with distance, records, and a chain in a blue dish by my bed. It ends with me understanding that being believed is valuable, but being documented is stronger. It ends with my mother no longer able to walk into a church room, pick up a microphone, and decide who I am. She spent months trying to make me sound like a girl who steals from the dead. What she built instead was a file that showed exactly who